Good morning. Nice Sunday morning, and welcome to Adi. Adi, how are
Thank,
you?
thank you, sir. Doing well.
And that's very nice. I see Colonel Abhay Rishi also on the podcast of ours, right? And actually, it was he who, started off this whole story yesterday when he put out a tweet that I should discuss this entire business of Ukraine and everything. So I'd like to put first Adi as to what he wanted us to do, and then we can discuss it.
Sir,
So yeah, what he wanted us, and Colonel Abhirish is a veteran of long standing. He says, what is the likely strategic objective of Russia in invading Ukraine? Possible reasons for stalemate, probable outcome, and lessons learned. Right? So, fine. These are the standard things. I think we need to go a little beyond and see where this whole story is going. What's your take on it initially? Let's have your opening views and then we'll go forward.
we've kind of discussed this about, I think, about not a year, but I think 10 months
Long
ago.
back, yeah,
And what I look at it is that, of course, there are both sides who've got existential crisis in their hand at the end of it. Russia calls it a crisis with regards its own security. Ukraine, of course, is the one getting beaten down. So there's a bit of a challenge there as well. But main issue that has come about, so is this is not a localized war. This war is actually expanded into domains which have opened up reality for a lot of
people.
nations, especially like India.
Yeah,
We have a whole sort of different sort of an approach to this war which has happened. It's a military conflict, yes. Military conflict. A lot of people say it's a grinding war as far as the military is concerned, but it's also a war on words, war on media, war on the narratives, and that's something that, as a biggest lesson that I've taken from this. Sir.
yeah, right. I go with you completely. Uh, 1 year and going, and we've entered the second year with no end in sight. Each side reinforcing the fact that they want victory, others jumping in, and there's a military stalemate, right? Nothing much is moved on the battlefield. One village here and there, and nothing decisive, right? All attempts at decisiveness by either side have fallen flat. So there are a lot of military lessons, there are a lot of geopolitical lessons, and a lot of misery all round. Let me be very honest with you. If you remember some time back, when we had a discussion, I had said, look, this is a war where everyone's going to lose. But having said that, it's happened, it's there, so we'll analyze it, right? I'll start this analysis and I'll let you take it on because you gave me the slide and just take us through as to what's happened and then we'll talk further.
Well, sir, I think this is the on the left hand side we see the top slide, which is the first phase of the war,
Yeah,
where a lot of people now, if you there are two different aspects of it. One, if you look at the Western aspect of it, they say that the Russians came, they could not achieve their aims towards Kiev, and they withdrew. If you look at what the Russians say, is that this particular attack was one, a feint, and second, to try and push Ukraine onto the negotiation table. So, which is what happened. But then reports today tell us that the Western powers were not very keen on a negotiation. So I think that whole thing fell apart. There was the second slide, which was the withdrawal or the counterattacks that took place with regards to Ukraine, especially towards the north. The Russians basically withdrew from Kiev. And then after that, we saw the September counterattack, which is the pushback that, as you say, sir, which is,
yeah,
September, October, November. Some counterattacks took place where the Russians were pushed back in Kharkiv in the north, and they withdrew from the southern part, of they came off from the western flank of the Dnieper River. So that's something which has been happening right now. Of course, a lot of reports are there that large concentration of forces which are building up on towards three major regions in the eastern part of Ukraine, which is one is in the northern Donbass, which is a place called Kremenaya, Liman, that area. Then the second grinding assault, which is being on city block by block, which is in Bakhmut, and the third one in the south, which is Zaporozhye and
yeah,
Vuhledar, where battles are pretty hardcore right now. So
Yeah,
that's what it is right now, and a lot of speculation with regards to a winter offensive from Russia actually fell flat. Now people are talking about a grinding war of attrition and a very slow incremental progress as far as you also mentioned, one village here, one village there.
yeah.
It's
Uh,
it's
uh,
it's
I agree with you. Actually, if you look at all the four maps, right? In fact, the last three maps, the Russian part has not hardly changed. You could put arrows all around, but nothing has changed,
yeah.
right? And if you really look at it, the way the both the forces have behaved, and I don't know whether much will change, right? Uh, okay. Having said that, I think uh, uh, let's discuss what are the aims. Why did all this start? Why did all this start? What were each chap's aim? Why what did they want to achieve? And then we'll also side by side say, okay, what did they do further? Could they achieve anything? Right? And so we'll have a look at it. And in fact, actually, strictly speaking, we have done this earlier. Don't you remember?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah. So let's reiterate what it is. Let's first start with the Russians. Okay, and you can jump in wherever you feel you want to highlight a thing. Just
So
feel free. Okay. Look, the premise of Russia was that NATO in Ukraine is an existential threat to it. That was unacceptable to Russia. It wanted Ukraine to be part of Russia, or either completely part
subservient.
of Russia, or it's a buffer or a part of its influence, subservient to it. And then achieve this, Russia put its nuclear card on the table. It garnered Chinese support. You know that before the war started, Putin and uh, friend Xi Jinping had a talk, no holds barred friendship and all that, right? And now, as it appears in hindsight, it was fully prepared for all the sanctions which were going to come, and it had anticipated, and to that extent, I think the whole thing was pre-planned, and it is very clearly indicated that it will go to all lengths to secure its core strategic interests. But as we have just seen, it does not have the capability to hold uh, Ukraine militarily or financially, and it cannot also capture it. That is quite apparent by now. But it will continue to use unrestricted force. Right. If this is the matrix on which we are talking of the Russian aims and objectives and all that, do you think they have achieved it?
Yes and no, sir.
Okay.
The couple of things that which come to mind with regards to, if I may just put it
Yeah,
into
take your
three
time.
simple parts. Three simple parts. One is the people. Of course, the people of Donbass has been under a lot of attacks since 2014, and that's pretty well evident now. So at least the areas that have gotten under Russian occupation, Mariupol and all that stuff, have settled down a bit. So some people life is begun. But one of the biggest challenges with regards to people is actually seen by Ukraine, because it started with a population of about 36, 38 million. It was purported to be 44, but a lot of people say it's 36, 38. About 8, 10 million people just left. They,
Yeah,
just
they
packed
have
their
gone
bags
to
and left.
Poland and all that.
Poland, Russia, all over the place.
Yeah,
Another 4 million people are currently under the Russians in terms of the four regions that
yeah,
he's occupied. Uh, the their own reports say about 2.5 million people are working in abroad as it is. So that gives you close to about 15, 16 million people which are not there out of the 35, 36 million population. And then of course 500,000 people are purported to be in uh, critically injured, dead, missing in
yeah. Sick.
action, POWs. So for a country of the size of Ukraine, I mean, sustainability of the country has pretty much come to a question today. So that's one aim that I think the Russians would be happy with, that the structure of Ukraine has become pretty weak. As a matter of fact, on the flip side of it, the Russians, as you said, wanted NATO to be away from the border, but I guess they kind of,
NATO has come to the border.
yeah, so they messed that up. so that's as far as the people is concerned. The second part I would talk about I mean, I won't talk about the military, sir, because that's something that I'd leave to you. But geopolitics wise, the world has kind of realized that there is a lot of stuff that happens behind the scene with regards to narrative, and that's something which is not coming out in the open, but generally people can accept that a lot of stuff is probably being propagated, which is may not be the reality.
Yeah.
So people
So a
are
lot of
ask,
narratives, false
lot people
narratives.
are beginning to ask questions, and that's something
Yeah.
which is very interesting to me. That the credibility of a Western narrative or Western media narrative is actually getting a little bit of a jolt. Um, so that's interesting. And the third part, sir, is basically economically that I mean, Europe was a strong economy, which is down to the halt. UK, which is of
Yeah.
course not part of the European Union, has food shortages and this and that and the other. Americans, are, of course, making money, but the Russians, interestingly, everybody thought it would be 15% down, but it actually
Yeah.
stabilized at the 2.1%. So that's
Right.
very interesting
So
to me.
good. So we've looked at the Russian angle which you have put across. Now let's see it from the Ukrainian point of view. What does Ukraine want, and has it achieved? I mean, it's very clear that Russia has not achieved anything much, but it has achieved something. Look at Ukraine. Ukraine started off with the premise that it would wanted to join NATO or EU, but then to start with, it was a divided nation with a divided polity,
Yeah,
right? There's a the humanitarian disaster which is on. People, economy, infrastructure is wrecked, as you rightly said. People are all over the country. The sustainability of this country, as a nation, is at question. But then, whoever is there, so the Ukrainians will fight with the Russians with
yeah,
newfound hatred. Okay, it's not going to be a peaceful land. And ultimately, this is my view that the whole story will degenerate into a, you know, Western sponsored insurgency, right?
absolutely.
So, now where does that leave Ukraine with its initial objectives to where it is today?
So, as a matter of fact, one thing I think all of us would agree that Ukrainians have fought. They have fought tooth to
Yeah.
nail. I mean, they're losing in certain cases 500 men a day, but there is just no respite. They're good fighters. There's just no question about it, and that's something again they are going to fight. So we've seen these backstabbing attacks. If you look at it from the Russian perspective, or insurgent attacks, if you look at it from the Ukrainian perspective, happening. You've had that bridge blowing up. You've had these air
Yeah,
bases in Russia
they
getting
fought
hit.
well. There's no doubt that
They've they've
Ukraine has
they've
fought well.
whatever they had, they've done well. Having
Look,
said that, sir,
yeah, but I'm not looking at it militarily at this point of time.
as a
I'm look
nation,
as a nation.
that's
So
actually where I'm coming to. So the right wing, hardcore right wing structure within Ukraine is getting very strengthened up,
yeah,
and with the kind of weapons which are actually there, I mean, the last thing that I would say is Ukrainistan is what comes to my mind.
so that means you're going to see a militarized Ukraine, which is going to be, right. It then in that case, what are you going to say? Yeah, sorry. The last point of degenerating into a Western-sponsored insurgency is on the cards, whichever way it goes,
It can
right?
flip back also, sir, because
Yeah, I
everywhere
understand.
the Russians have thrown, the Americans have thrown arms, they've gone back to fight them after that. So,
Right. I see your point. So there is a problem. No,
big
there's
problem.
going to be a problem, and Ukraine, the way it has militarized itself, with the kind of militarization which has happened in the Donbass and the Donetsk areas also. So you're going to find this problem continuing. A militarized society, fragmented society. So it's not able to join EU or NATO, right? That also aim is not achieved. So it's a loser. In any case, everyone knows that the Ukrainians are going to be the final losers. Now let's look at USA, NATO, EU. What are their objectives? What was it? Again, in hindsight, we realize that defeating Russia or bleeding it by proxy was the US aim. And we had discussed this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's part of the larger global struggle which USA wants to, especially after the defeat in Afghanistan, it had to
Afghanistan.
redeem itself. This is also a signal to China. We have discussed this, that you catch Russia and then China will automatically fall in place, right? Or you deal with Russia now and we deal with China later and signal to China. And it put strain on that relationship between China and Russia, which was developing.
May I add something that you had
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
in my show, where I think,
yeah.
I don't know if it's there in the top of your mind. I've termed it pretty well. I am giving you all the credit for actually teaching me this. It's a doorstep war policy.
Yeah,
So there are three power centers today. India is, of course, emerging power center, and we'll talk about that. But two power centers, Russia and China, which is against the West. So you've got a war on their doorstep.
yeah. You take the war to their doorstep and, and ensure that they don't get together to fight you separately, right? You separate them, right? Okay. And then, of course, incorporation of Ukraine into NATO and EU, it was some kind of a vague aim which was stated or objective, which I don't think is now coming through. But it will continue to support Ukraine with arms, training, finances, and sanctions. It has happened.
Hmm.
It will continue to support a pro-Western Zelensky or anyone who comes after that, right? But it will not deploy troops in Ukraine. It will not escalate the nuclear situation because it's very clear that it doesn't want to get into a nuclear fight or this thing. And we are now very clear that the West will fight this battle till the last Ukrainian. So when you see it in this context, has the West achieved its aims and objectives?
By pushing Russia, yes, sir. There's no
Yes.
question about it.
So
Uh,
what you're trying to say is that whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or the West, they've all achieved their aims partially, but all have not achieved many of their aims.
Many of their aims. As a matter of
Okay?
fact, one thing big that they've achieved is actually pushing the NATO, as we discussed, right, to the Russian border, and that's interesting.
Yeah. So they look what Russia wanted to avoid has happened. Okay, what NATO wanted has happened, but both have not been able to come to, you know. And of course, there is one thing which you mentioned about the economy, Russian economy, and all that. I think the NATO and the EU vastly underestimated the Russian power of taking on attrition and getting back, because this is the characteristic of Russia.
Russia
Whether you call it in its actions or in its defense against Napoleon or Hitler or
or all these guys.
yeah, all later, Russia has a historic capability of taking on punishment and giving it back. It
Yes,
is
sir.
prepared to fight a war of attrition. Right now, this is a new thing paradigm for NATO and USA. How far will it go is a $1 million question. Okay, till now, as far as the Ukrainian war was concerned, the talk was all about NATO, USA, Russia, Ukraine. But I think there's a fourth player in it.
There's always a fourth player, sir.
There's always a fourth player, China, right? I feel, China was biding its time and hiding its strength in this whole story to establish a Sinocentric world order. You heard the backdoor entry.
Hmm.
You look at it, Russia is being used as a proxy as much as, right? And it is also letting USA and West entangle with Russia to bleed each other. If you see the history, it, why did USA decline? USA declined because of its commitment with Iraq, then Afghanistan, 2 decades each, lost. Then before that, it was Vietnam. And all this, during this entire period, China kept gaining strength. And if it could bleed USA in this whole game further, China comes up as number one, right? I think this is a move. And Of course, Taiwan remains its focus. Now, this as a background, I think this is the aim and objective. Any views on this before we take it further?
Chinese, this thing is interesting, sir. They're treading a thin line, if I may.
No, that's okay. They're threading a thin line is not the issue.
But
You like,
militarily, I think Chinese are. I mean, I'm a non-military guy speaking. I'm
yeah,
open to
no, that's
correction.
okay. Speak, no problem.
Chinese are gonna be scared that
Hmm.
our teachers have not been able to, push forward the way they wanted to. What are
Yeah.
we gonna do in Taiwan?
So I think, in fact, if you look at it from a different perspective, China has lost hell of a lot in this. I'll go back to that slide because one has to understand if there's a loser. I find in this entire thing, it is China, because in the process, we also have to understand there's a pandemic on in this period, right? China is coming out of that pandemic, zero COVID, and its internal problems, its economy is on the decline. Demographically, it is definitely going down.
Mm.
So China, which probably started this whole story last year, just before the Winter Olympics, with this secret understanding between Xi Jinping and Putin to establish a Sinocentric world order, by backdoor, has not achieved it. It's using Russia as a proxy is also not paid off, because we know in this entire process, USA has consolidated itself and become its economy has grown stronger, right? Whereas the Chinese economy went weaker, so the gap between China and Russia, USA, has you know,
Increase.
widened. It wanted USA and the West to entangle with Russia to bleed each other, but it is Russia which is bleeding, right? It can bleed hell of a lot is a different story, and USA is not committed. Taiwan is its focus, and today, like you rightly said, Taiwan has become a porcupine it can't swallow. And wars are. We'll talk about this. So I think that's a major thing which has happened, by which China is. I think if I term a loser, it is China, and even now China is on the tenterhooks which way to go. You agree with me or not?
Absolutely, I would say that the thinnest line that the Chinese have walked since the.
The
I don't think the pandemic was as thin a line, sir.
Yeah,
This
look
is a
at the during the pandemic, at least they had a very clear cut idea as to what they were doing. Now they have gone into a zone of high uncertainty, and I think they're having a serious problem, because you also have to understand the Chinese belligerence, especially after Nancy Pelosi's visit, has strengthened the first island chain of nations,
yeah, yeah,
right? And mind you, this is found mentioned in today's South China Morning Post, that the regional security architecture for it is going
changed.
against it. So that's gone. Your economy is gone. A lot of issues. So China, I think, is, if there's one loser I identify, it is China in this war. Okay, and of course you have to understand that geopolitically, China has been ignored. It is now trying to come up, which we'll discuss in the afternoon on your channel, right? How it is trying to regain its footing. Okay, now I just thought I'll flash another slide, which I spoke in a particular channel. This war has said that politico-military fusion is a must. You
Must.
look at it, especially from the Russian side, the politics and its military were not on one grid. We didn't know what it was. Then long war is a reality. The earlier
Absolutely.
notion, like you rightly said, China, and is if China expects that it's going to be a short war with Taiwan, they're mistaken, right? And nuclear war is a possibility, is something which is important, which has come up, and that is going to have a long-standing effect, especially in the Chinese, Japanese, South Korean, Russian context
Hmm.
around that area, with China and South Korea also saying that we want to go nuclear. These are the consequences of this war which has happened,
Yeah.
right? Look, another thing which has come out is firepower alone doesn't win battles. You need maneuver, right? You battle is a all arms. effort. Russia, with its huge firepower, has not been able to make gains. It has gone into huge collateral damage and sustained and a planned way of attrition of Ukraine. But it has still not been able to go past that line. Those four maps which we saw, that red line is almost static. There's a need to fight and not talk too much. And this is a lesson to China, because China talks hell of a lot. That we'll do this, we'll do that, and all that. So there's a need to fight. Right. This is very important. Every army is strong till the first shot is fired. This is a lesson to us. Okay. Every army looks very strong on paper, but the moment the first shot is fired, where does it go is a question mark. Ukraine looked very weak on paper, but it is turned the other way around. Right? It's fighting. And it's, like you rightly said, it's fighting with its back to the wall without any of this thing. Proxy wars are low cost and more effective, and that's what USA is doing. And if China gets into Taiwan, it'll end up with that. It'll end up fighting a proxy war or being fought. And of course, Russia is being bled till the last Ukrainian. That is what we had also mentioned. Right. Now, let me, dilate a little on issues pertaining to other issues of this war, the military part of it. You know, there is the last generation, as far as the military was concerned, was the revolution of military affairs. Now, all these disruptive technologies came into being. And today we are seeing a disruption in military affairs. And this is something we have spoken of, right? Where does this disruption in military affairs take us? It takes us into the issue of multi-domain warfare. This war, you'll agree with me, has been fought in all domains. Can you find
Mm.
a domain in which it has not been fought? It has been fought through peace, war, or wartime, day, night.
Yeah,
They've used state, non-state, state-sponsored actors, both sides, including the
cyberspace,
Wagner Group. Yeah, yeah,
cyber, huge,
cyber. I mean, you take it, air, land, sea has been used,
everywhere,
natural
everywhere. Mm.
space, cyberspace, right, nuclear, electromagnetic spectrum, vastly used. Energy and resources is a major plat- domain in which this battle is being fought. Russia couldn't have survived so far if it had not used the energy domain, right? Politics and ideology, naturally, diplomacy, economy. Then, of course, the three warfare, though it's the three warfare strategy of China, which I've adopted in the slide: public opinion, legal issue, and influence operations. But it is happening all around. Everyone is playing his narrative. This is the thing which is driving the narrative. Health, probably not out there, but health is a thing which will get played out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
casualties.
your views on this?
So interestingly, actually, while you were talking, it just struck my mind that actually this war has actually crossed into certain domains which normally wars don't.
Yeah,
If you now look at Seymour Hersh's report, and if you kind of believe what he says, international terrorism, uh, that's what he says. I'm just quoting him. But at the end of it, that act of blowing up that pipeline was something very significant, which
yeah,
actually made a lot of countries a little wary about their international assets. Uh, so I would say that this war has actually impacted, you know, more public opinion wise. It has also impacted the internal opinion of countries and leaders of the countries, that boss, how vulnerable are their assets and how vulnerable are their holdings in international standings in case something like this happens in the future.
yeah. That means there's a lot of loss of trust because we still don't know who blew it. Some reports say Americans blew it. Americans say they don't didn't blow it. Blow it. We don't know who.
Yeah, but now it's
So
a narrative, so
yeah,
it's
narrative. So there's a so trust is gone.
yeah.
When trust goes, narratives build up,
Then anything
right?
will sell.
Yeah, and then the influence operations and all that will start, right? Of course, besides China, I think there's a comment which I've got. Balaragwan says EU is also a big loser. I think so. EU has lost big time in this whole story. Okay. All this talk of about, getting Ukraine into EU and all that has only incensed Russia to take harden its position and not go to a, settlement of sorts. Okay. Now, having seen this, if you convert these domains into tactical, operational, and strategic spectrums. You see that in the tactical spectrum, this, the Ukrainian war, air, land, and sea, of course, a lot of issues on the legal front have been fought on the tactical spectrum. The tactical sphere. Cyber has been an adjunct to the normal conventional operations. At the operational level, you see space, nuclear, spectrum. When I say spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum as a whole, energy, and the public opinion have been used. Of course, at the strategic level, the larger politics, diplomacy, economy, health, and influence have been used in this war. Right? This is the way it is structured. I just thought I'll put it across because when you analyze it on hindsight, this is what comes out of the whole story. Okay, what are the consequences of this war? This is what Chat GPT says. Right? I just typed it out and said, look, what's going to happen in this war and what are the international consequences? So Chat GPT says strained relations between Russia and West, impact on international law, impact on regional security, impact on global energy markets, refugee crisis. Overall, the international consequences of Ukraine war have been significant, affecting regional security, global energy market, and relations between Russia and the West. But I think we need to simplify it and let's discuss this. The consequences are in the post COVID world order, humanitarian crisis, energy and food security, inflation, international law and rules based order, and the global insecurity. So let's spend some time on each of these.
Sure.
What are your views on the post COVID world order which is coming
Which
about?
order, sir?
Right?
That's the interesting thing, that people today are asking questions about the order. And if I may, I'll just go to your second last point, which is very interesting to me. That the questions are being asked that who wants to follow the law-based international order or the rules-based
With international order.
international order. So the law-based international order people are talking about is the UN Charter, and which is actually on paper. Rules-based is more of a, I don't
What
know.
you
I mean,
made, what you made for yourself arbitrarily, or you laid
yes,
down a rule and you don't want to, something like the 9 dash line, which has become a rule, right?
yes.
You want to manufacture a rule and then talk about it. That's
This is interesting because a lot of this thing, and you
yeah,
know that we never heard of something called the Global South before.
yeah, but I wouldn't say so. There was always a north-south dialogue.
Yeah, it was,
So,
but it wasn't
but
as prominent as.
yeah. So the point is, you know, if you look at it, when you look at the world order, you're looking at a Western order, you're looking at a Russo Chinese order trying to emerge itself, and you're looking at a neutral order of
Yeah,
largely the global south. So I wouldn't call it a tripolar world, but a trisected world is what we are staring at, whose lines are going to be blurred with actors like India, Turkey, Japan, and all trying to straddle all worlds, right? Not necessary all three, but at least two at least. Okay, so this is going to happen, and this is going to be a lot of flux.
hmm.
This future ahead is going to be a lot of flux, and till such time the Ukraine war continues, there's going to be this flux. In fact, beyond that also there's going to be flux. The only thing is the Ukrainian war has to first end. These are the current day consequences. So before we go further on these consequences, do you see some kind of a war termination coming about for this?
To me, sir, no, because
No.
I even if something comes about, because the amount of loss of lives that has happened, Ukraine perpetually, as I said, has lost almost 200,000 soldiers killed, and that's something which is coming out from many sources now. 200, 250,000 people, that some people are saying. The Russians actually, if you believe the BBC, which I don't know if I want to or not, but have said between 18 to 25,000 soldiers.
Look, what you're trying to say is there are a lot of casualties.
And when that kind of this thing impact is there, sir, to
How
stop
will
the
the
war
war
from
end?
any leader is impossible.
Yeah, one is that. The second thing is, you know, we are seeing as late as yesterday and day before, people are reinforcing the fact that we're going to achieve victory. If each feels that he's going to achieve victory, how will the war end? So
There's
there's no
no
war
common
termination.
place.
Yeah,
There's
there's
no
no
common place.
common place. In the first 3 4 months of the war, there were some talks how to, right? There was some sight that it will come to some termination, but that's not there today.
That's the whole thing, sir. That the Western, I mean, this is where I blame the West for largely because you had Angela Merkel, you had Francois Hollande, and you had a lot of these people coming out and actually saying, "Oh no, Minsk was just to buy some time." And when that happens, everybody's like, "Okay, wait," and that's what creates further impetus to the war, and that's why I find that it's a not an even playing
Look,
field for that
yeah,
matter.
it's no more. Not only that, when you want to give more weapons to Ukraine to continue with the war, how will the war end, right? And Russia is also trying to say, "I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that," and it wants to continue with its, bombing campaign. I won't say, I will call it a bombing campaign as good as the Allied bombing of Germany in the World War, right?
More
Or
precise, but yeah,
yeah. Okay. So if that is the equation which is going on, right? Conflict termination is not there.
not
If
happening.
conflict termination is not there, then you're getting back to these consequences. You're going to have a post-COVID world order, which is hazy, trisected, and unstable and in a flux. The humanitarian crisis won't disappear, right? It's going to be there for long. And this humanitarian crisis might not disappear with the end of the war. It might go beyond that because people have to relocate, people will have hatreds towards each other, especially in Ukraine, and otherwise also. Energy and food security. I think we are in for a rough ride. Already,
Boy,
a lot of people are having problems. The global south, as it is called, is having severe problems. It's okay. We in India have sidestepped it because we have food surplus. While we are energy deficient, we have capacities which help us get over that. Your refining capacity helps you get over this issue. I mean, I like to spend a minute on this business of energy thing
hmm.
because a lot of people have said that India has, benefited by this whole crisis, and that energy it gets cheap and it has funded the war and all that. Let me put it on record. What has now emerged? Initially, it was all felt that buying Russian oil meant funding Russia, and that India was profiteering by getting cheap Russian oil. Two-way bargain. But what has emerged is India gets all that Russian oil, refines it, and gives it to the West. USA is buying it. So if right, so whom are you blaming?
Apart from that, sir, USA is still buying uranium from Russia, so
Yeah. So this kind of a, what shall I say, double speak,
duality, yes, sir.
yeah, duality and hypocrisy is something which India doesn't need. Okay, yeah, inflation is going to be a reality, and inflation being a reality is going to hit all of us, but it is going to hit China the most because its exports are going to go down. Like I said, China has got the maximum to lose in this war, right? Because China, which is an export dependent economy, is getting hit badly. Its consumerism inside is not going, as we know that it has got internal problems and the demography problem has now come on their head. So it's going to be interesting to see what's happening in China as a fallout of the Ukrainian war. That's why if you go to the South China Morning Post and you see there are a lot of talk about Ukraine and the impact on China. They're worried. Okay. Then we already touched upon the international law and rules based order and the global insecurity which is going to persist. Anything else you want to add?
Actually, yes, sir. One major thing which is
Yeah.
coming across, and that's something which actually worries me, that the nuclear question is becoming a little more prominent because you had the Trump administration pulling off from the INF, from the 88 signed INF. Uh, then you had Joe Biden arbitrarily withdrawing from the ABM treaty,
Yeah.
and now the Russians going back from the start.
Yeah.
Now this signals a huge arms race coming across, and unrestricted arms race. And this is something that worries me because the Chinese are arming. You mentioned South Korea and all these guys want to arm up.
Japanese.
The
Iran
Russians have
could, Iran will come up into the bargain,
Iran will come up.
and
The Russians have a,
the basement bomb in Israel will come out now,
the
and
Russians
then
have so much. North
and
Korea
you
is sitting there.
yeah, and you have a very unstable Pakistan with nuclear
This,
weapons, where one
this
fool has said that he's going to sell nuclear technology and weapons to survive.
yeah.
So
So
there's a
this
lot. Look,
yeah,
that maybe
dangerous
I think you and I need to sit and discuss this separately in another show. Okay, on the business of nuclear thing. But what you said is right. So the one of the consequences is you're going to see a nuclear.
arms race.
I wouldn't say arms race. I wouldn't say I wouldn't call it an arms race because I don't think there is an appetite to increase the number of arms. But the point is that there's the modernization of your nuclear stockpiles, which China has already started, will lead you into the unknown areas, and you might have problems there. So that is something which is
The Russians
yeah,
have started, the Chinese have started,
yeah,
now the
yeah,
Americans are talking about
and
starting.
you're going to go into a whole lot of nuclear uncertainty
Yeah.
because you have rich nations which are, or rather, who want to up their nuclear stuff. Then you have poor nations like North Korea and Pakistan, who are financially almost bankrupt, having these and flaunting it. And then you have aspirational nations like Iran and Israel doing whatever they want. So we are in. I mean, we need to factor all this in, and we'll do that, right? Right. Okay, now I want to just switch to the Indian part of the story. Sorry.
Always.
Right. Now, I had written three articles on this. I had written the failed fire and centrality of India, right, which we had discussed on Dev Talks between Adi and I. Later, I wrote an article of India emerging as the third pole, and again, all in gunnershot.com, and the geoeconomics of India's rise. All these three references I've also put in the chat box, and I'll put it in the comments also after this show ends. Where am I leading to? What are the lessons for India in the whole story? That's more important to me. Look, India is in a very analogous position in this whole game. On the left, you see NATO, USA, and EU and Russia fighting through a proxy called Ukraine. Okay. The analogous situation for us, which we had discussed, Adi, if you remember, is China and India with Nepal in between. And we already discussed in our neighborhood, show, and that Nepal is becoming the Ukraine for India and China. Your views,
Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Yeah, I mean, any foray into Nepal is going to be unacceptable to India. So,
yeah,
existential threats and existential crisis, and that's something which is absolutely true. I absolutely agree with you, sir.
right. And with the way the governments keep flipping in Nepal, and the
Hmm.
way Chinese have made inroads, and now they're looking at building that railway from up Kodari to Kathmandu, and then they want to get it down to Terai. If that happens, you will have virtually you you be able to react like Russia did, right? That's the million-dollar question. When Russia didn't want NATO presence in Ukraine, that is why a lot of this story has started. So if there is Chinese presence in Nepal, what is your reaction?
That's a big question, sir.
Huh?
We need to be
It's a
capable
huge
enough of at
question.
least responding.
Yeah. What is your response? So since you know that the situation is coming up, would you like to deflect it? Or you just want to kick the can down the road for another 10, 15 years? You can't. So what are you going to do about it? How are you going to handle Nepal? And this is something which maybe you and I can discuss
Yeah,
separately because right. So very important, and this is something which is very pertinent to the whole story.
indeed, yes, sir.
Yeah. The next point is what are the lessons from Ukraine for us? And these are not exactly military lessons. These are lessons otherwise, which we need. The value of Atmanirbharta. It gives you strategic independence, right? There's a realization that future battles will be fought on our own. If you don't do that, you'll be like Ukraine. Or would you like to be like Russia, that you're on your own? Even a country like Russia has been running short of spares. It has turned to us for space. So the value of Atmanirbharta is underscored completely in this whole story. Then, of
Absolutely.
course, militarily, surveillance, information, intelligence, and media, they've all played an important part in NATO, Ukrainian, and Russian operations. All of them. We've said the battle of narratives. We've discussed this also, right? Now, a major part of this whole story is in the narratives. So, isn't there a major lesson in this for us,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely, sir.
How we do it is something very important. Then, battlefields will remain conventional. There is no doubt. If you remember, before this war and all, China used to say, "Oh, we have cyber, we have space, we have do this, we have that," all that nonsense, right? This war has proven that battlefields remain conventional. They're bloody, people die, and they cause misery, and there's a lot of violence. So you can't get away from this. Okay, right? Cyber systems and threats have failed to make an impact on actual outcomes of the battlefield. They might support issues, but they don't decide
Disturb
the
them,
outcome.
but yeah,
Okay, and they are more a tool of gray zone warfare. They're tool of coercion, and we need to recognize this. We not only need to recognize this, we need to develop our ability and capacity in this. Right? Right. Uh, Energy as a dominant factor in the conduct of war has come forth. The whole thing has been an energy game,
everything is a weapon, sir.
weapon, right? The nuclear domain has made a reappearance, which we spoke of, right? Which everyone thought a nuclear war is unfightable or unwinnable, X, Y, Z, but it has come forth, right? Precision ammunition is the way forward. Firepower rules, but cannot ignore maneuver. If you see the Russian mix of army, there's a problem, and someone has asked a question which I'll deal with it down the line, right? And then there's a we need to reduce our dependence on Russia, right? Both we have capital and revenue opportunities where we have to decrease, especially in our shipbuilding, aircraft manufacture, and strategic partnerships. We have to look away from Russia. In fact, we have to look away from anyone whom we can. Okay, right. And the last but not the least, morale and motivation matters, and the value of national leadership is of prime importance.
Prime importance.
Yeah, not only national leadership, it is leadership at military level also matters. You see the way Ukrainians have fought, right? It has made a huge difference. And as against the poorly motivated Russian forces, right? Okay. A major outcome of this war is the centrality of India as it is emerging. Everyone has come to us. That's why I said I've given three articles, which all of you who are watching this show might like to read and give it to your friends. My view is very clear. You might cry, you might you might haw, but I think India's time has come. Right? You might not believe it, you might not have confidence, but we'll discuss this in a separate show down the line as to why it has come. Okay, there are many reasons for this. So we will, uh, your views on this part of the story, Adi.
No, as a matter of fact, sir, there is no question. I mean, today also, as we speak, I think Olaf Scholz is there in India. He's
Yeah,
talking about working with India for developing further submarines. So you have the French working with us. Now you have the Germans working with us.
German,
And this is
right?
just for submarines. You've got the huge leverage that you've been able to build up for because of the aviation deals. One day
Yeah,
after the big tamasha that was created about Air India, a forgotten news about Indigo also ordering 500 aircraft
yeah,
got
they got
forgotten.
another 500 aircraft. So 1,000
They have
aircraft
got it.
makes the whole world's order. Yeah,
So the leverage that India is going to be able to actually pull, and it's not leverage in the sense used the China way, it's
No,
leverage
yeah,
used India way.
India way. And not only this, this is aviation sector. Uh,
Every sector, sir.
Apple is slated to sell 50% of its entire produce from India by 2027.
Sir, TSMC
Uh,
base in
and
USA has called, I think, Vedanta and said,
yeah,
you want, I think they're working on the 4 millimeter nano chip now.
right.
They're wanting to share the entire tech and
Technology
saying,
for
okay, take it,
this.
make it.
Right. So centrality of India is coming into play, and this is something which, like I said, this is part of the new world order which is emerging, right? The trisected world order in which India will have a role to play, right? So I think we've traversed a lot of time. So let's take on some questions,
Oh,
right?
sir.
And then we'll look at it. Now, there's a Karthik says, how bad is Russian military and did it fail to modernize its own forces? Where is the Russian Air Force, or is this a case of not flight worthy planes? Look, Russian military is good, there's no doubt, but unfortunately, and it's a very modern force. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the human capability to match.
Leadership has
Leadership
been
is
poor.
poor, and I've spoken of the politico-military fusion, which is lacking. So, if the aims of the war are not clear, the military plans will go haywire as much,
As a matter
right?
of fact, may I, sir, if you
Yeah,
don't mind? Karthik, I'd like to remind you what the Russians did in Syria. So when the military leadership like the Surovikin and the other guy, Gerasimov, who's now currently the head of the Ukrainian
head of
operation,
the yeah.
those guys were the ones who did what they did in Syria, and they were damn good. There was no question about it. So
But that's a different story, and this is a
different
scale.
story.
The scale is different, so there is a problem. Where is the Russian Air Force? Well, Russian Air Force is not taken to the skies for the simple reason that Ukrainian air defense has been very effective. Another
Now they've
major,
started a little bit, yes, sir.
they have. Let us see where it goes because we don't know, right? It's not because of case of not flight worthy planes. And then Russia was always feared for its tank forces and artillery, but why are they falling short in this story, in this conflict? Oh, well, it's very simple. Russia has used abundance of artillery, but its tank and infantry forces have not moved. They maneuver. Any battle is fire and move. The fundamental of battle is fire and move. That's been missing in this story. And I've written about it, right? And I've earlier also mentioned. So that is why it is where it is. Okay, right. Then let's us see. Okay, so Darshan says, what do you think about the information warfare that is being played by Western media, especially in the context of India, where they repeatedly try to malign our international image? Take
My
it on.
favorite word is narrative, sir. I
Yeah,
mean, I say that pretty openly. My favorite word is has become narrative after this war because at the end of it, everything revolves around that. The
yeah,
Russians can win the war today,
yeah,
and they can just go boom, 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 in Ukraine over.
yeah.
But they'll still lose the narrative war because they've not been able to pull out, uh, the kind of sparrows that the West has had in their arsenal. Of course, the slowly things are there. We know about the reality of the whole situation, but overall, if you balance it, uh, 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 you know, not emotionally, but actually on a piece of paper, you'll realize that Russians' narrative has been poor. So
Yeah,
information
I
warfare is very, very important.
information is right. It gives you the cutting edge at times, right? But equally, too much information will take you back.
That's what is
Okay,
happening. You can see both
yeah.
the examples right
Both
now.
these examples. So you come to a stage where you can't believe who's talking what. Okay, okay, right. Germany is being deindustrialized, and EU nation also dependency on USA will increase. It will. It is. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, Adi, there's a question to you. What are your thoughts on inflation in the world, especially the Western world?
That's, I think, the most critical factor where you're actually
Yeah,
seeing, and as I mentioned in the first part
it's
of
not.
the show,
It's not only the West inflation in the Western world. It's global inflation.
but
Yeah,
it's impacting the West more because the Western powers are shelling out money into Ukraine.
money. Okay,
So
but look, I have a slightly different take on this. The West
hmm,
has the technology to recoup its,
that's there, sir.
right?
But countries
The,
like, I
the,
mean,
the, the losers are the global South.
for me, the challenge is countries like UK, sir, where
Yeah,
it's
who don't have the population also to
the
back up
tech
and
pop population or the economy to hold
get
themselves up.
through. Yeah. Okay. The next question is by Rosa Rosa. Would the capture of Bakhmut by Russia be a game changer in this war? I don't think so.
Tactically.
Tactically, yes, they might gain a few here and there, but I don't think Russia has the capability to. Look, let me put this across to everyone. The area in which the entire Russian, Ukraine war is being fought is the same area in which von Manstein's backhand plan took place. The place where the battles of Kharkiv 1, 2, and 3 took place in World War II. It is in the same area in which the Battle of Kursk took place. The Battle of Kursk has been the
Largest tank battle.
greatest tank battle in the history, right, of warfare, where over 3,000 tanks were milling around in motion. Okay, there are sweeping changes. Kursk is, east of Kharkiv, and these guys
Kiev.
went to the Dnieper
Beyond.
and Kiev, right? That entire area, over 1,000 kilometers, they were back to and fro battles. Nothing has happened here. The battle lines have hardly moved. Capturing one Bakhmut has got no great value. Okay, unless the Ukrainian forces collapse completely.
Yeah, one that is one fear that
Yeah.
actually is because it's like a main junction point, so it may just create a lot of challenges for the Ukrainians.
Yeah, but I don't think it'll. Right, Adi sir, do you think the American want to end the war in a hurry? We discussed that. I don't think.
No,
Right.
it's now become
Okay.
an election this thing for Biden, so he's gonna pull it through as hard as he can.
Yeah, government does not understand economy or scale for defense industries. So yeah, I agree with you completely. In fact, I've written an article on our budget and its divergence between the capex for the civil and the budget allocation, you know, and the requirement of civil military fusion and the requirement of a lot of things. Right, I have already also written an article on civil military fusion and the requirement for India in Financial Express. Both these articles are in the Financial Express. Have a look at them. I think we are not able to leverage our defense corridors, and we need to do something because the defense military complex of military industrial complex of US drives its economy, and the new technologies are getting plastered onto it to drive the economy further. Unless we do that, we will be in a problem. Okay, hey, what does it take for India to become 100% Atmanirbhar in defense? Oh, yeah, it takes a lot. I think we are a long way away from it. It takes a generational change. And I've written about it, I have talked about it. For some reason, for some funny reason, there's a divide between the Atmanirbharta in defense and the Atmanirbharta in the civil sector. I mean, this is something which I am not happy with, right? And I've spoken about it in all kinds of forums. It's not happening. Right. Next question, sir. Any chance of overthrowing of Putin in Russia? If that happens, I don't think. Look, this is very okay. अगर हमारी चीन से युद्ध हुआ तो हम कितने समय तक लड़ सकते हैं? जो उतने समय तक लड़ सकते हैं जब तक हम चीन हार जाए, इसमें अब कोई डाउट नहीं होना चाहिए. ठीक है. Okay. Adi sir, France saying they won't sign on a communique. What is that? Yeah.
Joint communique
Yeah.
because Russia is involved. See, these are all political statements. Let it happen
Uh,
on the ground.
yeah.
India last time was able to actually get all the Western powers sitting with Russia and discuss during the G20. It'll
Yeah.
happen again.
Right. Then Rosa says you're confirming that India is acting as a conduit to supply space. Sorry, Rosa, I think you're getting it wrong completely. Right? Uh, India has not given space. India was asked. That's about all.
India is supplying spares to countries that are using Russian
Using
weapons like
Russian
Egypt
equipment.
and other
Yeah,
countries,
but
not to Russia.
not to Russia. Right? Yeah. Then the next question is asked Raghunandan, General Sir, can you yeah, I think we tackle this, isn't it? Okay. Anything else? Let me see. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. I think that's about all, Adi. We've
So,
gone through the whole gamut of questions, um, and let me see if there's anyone else who has a point of view, can put it across, and I'll open it to all of you to express your views. Give me your thing, and I'll put it. Yeah. Next question: what are the chances on a scale of 10 that India and CCP army will go to war in future? I think the scale is 1. I was about to say 0. Right, you'll have a lot of these small Yangtze kind of things. You must remember one thing, when you analyze China, and I'll do it separately. I'll analyze China because, see, like I've shown an analogous situation between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening here. Okay, so it is only natural in the scheme of things that the thing will come. Okay, will there be a war between India and China? Let me put it in perspective. First and foremost, war between two nuclear nations of this magnitude is off. Both don't want it. India is on the move and unstable. Why I say move and unstable? Because it's on the rise. Anything which is moving is unstable. Even if a cycle which is moving is unstable, unless it catches speed and gets stability. That's the law of life. So it is moving up. China is moving down, and China knows it. Its population is declining, all the ill effects of the Ukrainian war and all it. Now, if war for both these countries is detrimental to each other's interests,
yeah, most
that
importantly.
is why till last week you were talking across the border on the LAC. Now the talk has shifted to Beijing.
Diplomacy.
Diplomacy.
And somebody's coming to India also, sir.
Somebody is coming to India. So there's something else happening. Please understand, gone are the days when China could show their eyes to you. We are on a different wicket. That is why I'm saying I'll do this talk. I'll combine these three. I'll do this slide, the slide which, 1 minute. Yeah, I'll combine this. I'll talk about this. I'll talk about India's rise, right? And as nations rise, you will not have, right. Okay. Now, RD says, can I please say thanks from the bottom of my heart for these shows to both of you. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Yeah,
Good.
join us back at 3 o'clock for a
Yeah,
discussion
3
on
o'clock.
Russia and China.
Yeah, right. Right, folks, this is what I had to say. My request to all of you after having listened to all this is, if you like Gunner Shot, subscribe to it. Someone has said my logo is bad, my whole story is bad. That's okay. I am not bothered about my logo. A gunner is a gunner is a gunner, and his shot has to be shown as the logo. Right? Thanks a lot, and Jai Hind to all of you, and thanks Adi for coming in, and we'll meet again at 3:30. When?
3 p.m., sir.
3 p.m. Fine. And then look, we'll just join us back because we're going to talk something very interesting. We're going to talk China there. Okay. Right. And yeah. Yeah. One last question. I'll take it on. Ask General Sir, we need a good Boy Scouts program at school level like that in the US. There are 30. Look, we have one of the best NCC. Our NCC program
Yeah.
is one of the best in the world. They're the most extensive in the world. We are just not leveraging it. We should not keep looking at USA and all. We have to look at our strengths and bring up our strengths. And I'll leave it at that. Anything more, Adi? That's it. Right. Thanks, and see you at 3:30. 3 p.m. No,
3 p.m., sir.
3 p.m. Bye. Thanks and Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir.